لك يا لبنان 2020
وجوب تسهيل مهمة رئيس الحكومة.
إن هذه المعادلة المصر قد ماتت على يد حزب الله بالذات.
We are prepared to strike whenever we choose.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Lina Tamim and these are today's top stories. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is meeting Arab League leaders in Paris as part of a European tour to gather support for intervention in Syria. Maronite Patriarch Shada Rai condemns the spread of arms outside the state's authority and says the army is the sole guarantor of Lebanon's security. And tens of thousands of Tunisians are taking to the streets to renew their demands that the Islamist-led government step down. Maronite Shada Rai stresses that the army guarantees Lebanon's security and sovereignty and condemns the spread of arms outside the state's authority. During his Sunday sermon, Rai said the use of illegitimate weapons pose a threat to the army and other security agencies in Lebanon. He calls for the implementation of a defense strategy for Lebanon and an end to what he calls autonomous security. Rai also calls on politicians to unite in order to resolve the crisis over the formation of a new government. He declares the government should include all powers and be able to revive constitutional institutions. Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat has received the newly appointed U.S. ambassador to Lebanon, David Hale, at his Clemenceau residence. Hale and Jumblat discussed their general situation in Lebanon and the region. The meeting was also attended by Social Affairs Minister Wael Abou Faoud and PSB Vice President Douraï Diari. The new ambassador arrived in Lebanon last week and presented his credentials to President Michel Sleiman on Friday. Hale replaced former U.S. Ambassador Mara Connelly, who recently left her post. A Syrian national has been arrested on charges of attempting to prepare explosives. This is according to the national news agency, which says that the General Security has arrested Ahmed Osama al-Tumani near the vegetable market in the Nahr Ibrahim region. He was found in possession of a plastic bottle, flammable material, and an electric charger. He confessed to communicating with individuals in Syria who were teaching him how to assemble explosives. Investigations are underway with the suspect. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is meeting Arab League leaders in the French capital of Paris as part of a European tour to gather support for intervention in Syria. Earlier, Kerry said the number of nations prepared to take military action was now in double digits, but the list has not been made public. France strongly supports intervention in response to the use of chemical weapons in Damascus last month, but it wants to wait for a report by UN weapons expert before taking actions. Kerry says the U.S. will consider French suggestion of possibly returning to the UN Security Council on Syria, but Obama has made no decisions on this.
The President of the United States has made no decision, and I will return to Washington, and obviously this will be a point of discussion, but we take that decision under advisement. But the President has given up no rights of decision with respect to what he may or may not do. These are chemical weapons which for almost 100 years the world has banned from usage. And in time of war, the only people who have used them are Adolf Hitler and Saddam Hussein, until Bashar al-Assad. Now, we know that there are security interests of the United States in the terrorists, the jihadists, who grow in that part of the world in their focus on the West, on Europe, on the United States, and elsewhere. And if these weapons fall into their hands, every American, everybody in Europe should be concerned.
British Foreign Secretary William Hague says the world needs to respond to the Syrian regime's use of chemical weapons. As he says, it is a bigger issue than Syria, adding that Britain does not intend to send its troops into harm's way, in his words.
This issue is about chemical weapons, which is a bigger issue than Syria. What the United States has been talking about, what we were talking about before the vote in Parliament, was a limited and proportionate response to the use of chemical weapons to try to deter the use of chemical weapons. We're not a government that is gung-ho about military action. You know, in most of the world's trouble spots that we're working hard on, like Somalia or on Mali, we're actually financing, Europe is financing African forces to do the work on the ground, and we help with development work and diplomacy, and that is the model that we're pursuing wherever we can, not sending British troops into harm's way. But there are many risks in all directions, as I say. There is no risk-free course of action about a situation as difficult as Syria, and foreign policy is a choice, not between the perfect course of action and the dreadful one, but between the balance of risks and the lesser of evils. And from everything I've seen as Foreign Secretary, I believe that allowing the spread and use of chemical weapons in the 21st century is an evil that we have to stand up to, one way or another.
The Senate Intelligence Committee has posted a link to a video prepared by the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, showing YouTube videos of victims of a suspected chemical weapons attack in Syria. Senator Dianne Feinstein, the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, says that she has asked the CIA to prepare a DVD for lawmakers to show evidence that the Syrian government has used chemical weapons against its own people. The DVD is another tool that could be used to persuade lawmakers to give President Barack Obama congressional approval to carry out a limited military strike against Syria. The videos reportedly show people who either died or were being treated as a result of the chemical weapons attack. Syrian rebels, including jihadists linked to al-Qaeda, have taken control of the historic Christian town of Ma'loula, north of Damascus. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the battle for the town has left at least 17 rebels dead and more than 100 wounded overnight. Ma'loula is home to around 5,000 residents and is one of the strategic importance for the rebels, who are trying to tighten their grip around the capital of Damascus. Capturing the town could also help rebels threaten the nearby highway between Damascus and Homs, a supply route used by the regime. Troops were still stationed around the town, raising the possibility of renewed fighting. Coming up next, Tokyo wins the bid for the 2020 Olympics. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says a potential U.S.-led military strike against Syria would be illegal based on the United Nations Charter. Zarif has arrived in the Iraqi capital, Baghdad, for talks with officials on his first foreign visit since being appointed. Before leaving Tehran, Zarif told reporters that the trip aims to bring both countries' points of view closer and to discuss regional and bilateral issues. He added Iraq and Iran share the same concerns regarding a new conflict being waged in the region. Iran, a staunch supporter of the Syrian regime of President Bashar al-Assad, actively opposes plans by the U.S. and France to launch a military strike against Damascus. It also backs claims that rebels, not the Assad regime, have carried out the chemical attacks on the Damascus suburbs, which killed hundreds of people. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has urged the European Union to postpone a planned ban on EU financial assistance to Israeli organizations in the occupied Palestinian territories. Kerry made the request at a meeting with EU foreign ministers in Lithuania, at which he also called on them to support Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations, which resumed on July 29th after a nearly 3-year hiatus. The EU imposed restrictions in July, citing its frustration over the continued expansion of illegal Jewish settlements in territory captured by Israeli forces in the 1967 Middle East War. The ban renders Israeli entities operating in the occupied territories ineligible for EU grants, prizes or loans beginning next year. Israel's rightist government has accused Europeans of harming Israeli-Palestinian peace efforts and responded by announcing curbs on EU aid projects for thousands of West Bank Palestinians. Tens of thousands of Tunisians are taking to the streets to renew their demands that the Islamist-led government step down and end a political deadlock threatening the North African country's fledgling democracy. It was the largest protest since Tunisia's crisis erupted over the killing of an opposition leader in July, increasing pressure on the ruling Ennahda party to make way for a caretaker government before proposed elections. Waving red and white national flags and pictures of slain opposition leader Mohamed Brahmi, protesters packed streets around a building where a National Assembly has been drafting a new constitution until its work was suspended due to arrest. Divisions between Tunisia's Islamists and their secular opponents have widened since the uprising that ousted President Zain al-Abidine bin Ali. Polling stations have opened in the Russian capital, Moscow, for the first direct mayoral elections in a decade. The vote, seen as the barometer of the mood of protest in Moscow, is expected to show whether political opposition to the government of President Vladimir Putin is capable of mounting an electoral challenge. 6 candidates are fighting for the right to control Russia's biggest and wealthiest city, including charismatic Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny, 37. Although most mayors in Russia are elected, the mayor of Moscow and Russia's second city, St. Petersburg, share the same status as governors, who were appointed by the Kremlin until political reforms passed in 2012 reinstated direct elections. And now for news around the world in brief. 15 civilians have been killed in a NATO airstrike on pickup truck carrying women and children in eastern Afghanistan. NATO says 10 fighters have died in the strike and that it had no reports of any civilian deaths. The latest disputed airstrike occurred in Watapur district of Kunar province near the border with Pakistan. Brazilian basketball star Oscar Schmidt is to be inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. Schmidt is considered basketball's unofficial all-time scorer with 49,737 points during a career that spanned nearly 30 years. 55-year-old Schmidt underwent brain surgery in May of this year for a cancerous brain tumor and is reportedly still battling the disease. The Japanese are celebrating throughout the country as they have won the bid for the 2020 Olympics. The International Olympic Committee announced the news in Buenos Aires, Argentina. The Japanese capital of Tokyo will be the first Asian city to host the Olympics twice, having hosted the 1964 Games. Tokyo was making its second straight bid after losing the 2016 race that went to Rio de Janeiro. An Ohio man has confessed to driving drunk and killing another man in an inspiring video posted on a social media site. The 3.5-minute YouTube video shows Matthew Cordell, 22, admitting he drove the wrong way down a highway directly into oncoming traffic, striking and killing 61-year-old Vincent Canzani on June the 22nd. A prosecutor says Cordell may face homicide charges next week.
My name is Matthew Cordell. And on June 22nd, 2013, I hit and killed Vincent Canzani. This video will act as my confession. When I get charged, I will plead guilty and take full responsibility for everything I've done to Vincent and his family. If I took a different route, maybe I would get a reduced sentence and maybe I would get off. But I won't dishonor Vincent's memory by lying about what happened. By releasing this video, I know exactly what it means. I'm handing the prosecution everything they need to put me away for a very long time. But I'm willing to take that sentence for just one reason, and that reason is so I can pass this message on to you. I beg you, and I say the word beg specifically, I'm begging you, please don't drink and drive. Don't make the same excuses that I did. Don't say it's only a few miles, or you've only had a few beers, or you do it all the time, it'll never happen to you, because it happened to me. And all of those are just excuses to make yourself feel better about a decision that you know is wrong and could cost lives. I can't bring Mr. Canzani back, and I can't erase what I've done. But you can still be saved. Your victims can still be saved. So please.
Inspiring video. You can save lives by sitting in the passenger seat after a few drinks. Think about it. And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Now let me remind you of our headlines. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is meeting Arab League leaders in Paris as part of a European tour to gather support for intervention in Syria. Maronite Patriarch Shadadai condemns the spread of arms outside the state's authority and says that the army is the sole guarantor of Lebanon's security. And finally, tens of thousands of Tunisians are taking to the streets to renew their demands that the Islamist-led government step down. Those were your Sunday headlines from Future Television, live from Beirut. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very good evening ahead.
حبك يا لبنان 2020.
وجوب تسهيل مهمة رئيس الحكومة.
إن هذه المعادلة المصر قد ماتت على يد حزب الله بالذات.
We are prepared to strike whenever we choose.